joining us for this week's edition of
Afternoon Intersections, where we connect God's Word to everyday life.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Afternoon Intersections. I know that we haven't been with you the last few weeks. We've had a couple of things going on in our congregation. And just did not prevent us to be able to be here with you on this forum and this medium, but we're back and we're so glad to have everyone that is joining us and watching this broadcast or who will watch this broadcast at some time in the future. Again, the goal of Afternoon Intersection is to try to connect the Word of God to everyday living. We want to take the message of Scripture and see how it relates to our lives and our journey to deeper faith with Jesus Christ. We want to welcome you. Everyone that's watching, you're welcome to ask any questions. You can post it in the chat or comments. We'll do our best to share them with you. Or if you would like to send a question via text, we'll put that number up across the stream where you can text in a question or a comment. At this time, I want to welcome some of our panelists that have been here with us before. We want to first bring on Elder Edwin Smith. He's an elder in our congregation as well as the associate head deacon. He wears many hats. He's led men's ministry for many years, and we're so glad. He's also one of our Sabbath school teachers, so we're so glad that he's here with us today. Again, welcome, Elder Smith.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right. And of course, we want to bring back on with us again another two individuals who are normally here with us, Robin and Carlin Alford, or Carlin and Robin Alford. We want to.
Now you got it right.
Well, we want to welcome them here again with us today for another edition of Afternoon Intersections. And so we just want to have a word of prayer with everyone here today, and we're going to jump right into our conversation for today. Father, we invite your holy presence to be with us, that you would lead and guide our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to begin by just letting everybody know we've been preaching through the book of Jonah. Today was the final message in Jonah. The series was called Committed, and we've been looking at basically how God's compassion towards sinners, right? And we see some great illustrations of that in that story. And so we want to today take kind of a macro look at Jonah. We'll focus in on some specific things that we focus on in a sermonic moment today, but just kind of look at Jonah generally, that story there of Jonah. And so we want to deal with some central themes, and just so we can be anchored for those of you in terms of a text that we'll kind of narrow in on, it'd be from Jonah chapter 2, verse 10. I just want to read just a couple of them here. It says, "So the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent. And Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. Then he cried out and said, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be thrown down. So the people of Nineveh believed God, proclaimed a fast, and put on sackcloth, from the greatest to the least of them." And so here we see a miraculous conversion experience. But just before we get to that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a central theme that emerges in the book of Jonah of God's commitment to loving every kind of sinner, right? No matter what kind of sinner you are. You know, we see that with Jonah, he's a religious sinner. And then, of course, we see this with Nineveh, right? But we also see, just based on the story, some unconventional ways that God tries to reach Jonah. And so I don't know if you guys think about that. You know, what are some of the unconventional ways that we see God using in Jonah's life to reach him? And how is this approach, particularly these varying approaches that he uses, actually a revelation of his commitment to Jonah? You know, before we talk about his commitment to Nineveh, we first see his commitment to Jonah, which is a symbol of Israel. So just want to hear from you guys, just anything that stood out to you from the Jonah story and some of the unconventional ways the Lord tried to reach Jonah, and how does that reveal his commitment to him?
Pastor, I believe that God has a myriad of ways of saving us. When I look at the story of Jonah, for all practical purposes, Jonah should have drowned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't drown. I mean, if I look at if me and I didn't drown, and I would look at it as another chance to get my life right. I think, by Jonah being saved just from being drowned is a testament to itself.
Mm-hmm.
It causes one to look within and see where they are and make changes to their life. And to be able to live through such a traumatic experience, it's a wonder if Jonah didn't go crazy. And I'm just being real. To be caged in the side of in the belly of a fish.
Mm-hmm.
In the inside of a fish, because I love to fish. In the inside of a fish, and slime and feces and a bunch of stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
For him to survive that, had was none short than a miracle from God.
Yeah. And I mean, as I think about that, God uses a fish to swallow him alive, and that is a way in which he is revealing that he is committed to Jonah and saving him. And that amazes me. It's like, because we don't think about being swallowed alive by a fish as in any way salvific. You know what I mean? But here we see God, that fish actually saves him from drowning and gets his attention. I don't know if Carlin or Robin want to jump in here or add anything to some of God's unconventional ways.
Well, let's be clear about the kind of fish that Edwin Smith catches. It's nothing like the fish that was in the Bible. The fish that Edwin catches comes with a biscuit and some fries on the side. That's the kind of fish that Edwin catches.
And some coleslaw. Anyway.
And some coleslaw. Let's be clear. But it is the story of Jonah for me personally. Is just it fits perfectly with your theme, Pastor, that has been committed. God is committed to us. Before Nineveh even gets into the picture, God is committed to Jonah. And the thing, it is like, I heard Myron Edmonds preach a sermon one time, and he said that when you delve into the sermon, and I know I'm jumping ahead, that the message that Jonah eventually delivered, he delivered it with maleficence. He delivered it begrudgingly still after all that he went through. And God was committed to Jonah being the one delivering the message. It's like, no matter how much I mess up, no matter how bad my attitude is about the commission that God has given me, he is committed to me fulfilling my purpose on this earth. And if my purpose is to deliver the message to Nineveh, even if I curse them out, what they will hear is blessing. And I believe that when you start at the beginning of the story, everything that God allowed Jonah to experience was a symbol of his commitment to Jonah fulfilling his purpose, whether Jonah wanted to fulfill it or not.
Yeah. I was crying when I was studying this sermon, and that first part where they show on the map where Tarshish is. They don't even really know where it is. They just know it's like Nineveh is west and he goes east, or I think it's the other way around. But he is so determined that he doesn't even know where he's going, when he's going to end up there. He is so determined to disobey God because what God is calling him to is so unpleasant. But we see God, he sends a storm. He sends the whale. And we see that this is God trying to reach us. And I think for me, as I think about it, it brings comfort to me in the Christian experience. It doesn't matter where I go. Even when I purposely disobey the will of God, his love is still in pursuit of me. It makes me think of Psalms 23, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. That word, surely goodness shall chase me down all the days of my life. And so we see this idea of God's pursuit of us, no matter where we find ourselves, right? So we see God's commitment to us. It is also clear then, and as we go to the next question here that I want to ask, that God doesn't hesitate to use trials to reveal his compassion towards us, And so why is this often difficult to embrace as believers? this notion that in this trial that God is trying to reveal himself to me, right? And how is our culture and even popular Christianity today, how does it contribute in your mind to this difficulty of embracing trials in this life as a means of God's compassion towards us? Any thoughts on that?
I think for me, Pastor, I believe that when a person has traumatic experiences in their life, it can cause them to want something different, want to look at life different, and begin to make changes. And sometimes, bad things happen, and people make transformations. Transformations are, a part of it. But society would tell you that a loving God wouldn't allow the kind of things to happen to you. Why would a God who said he cares allow you to go through that? And so there is this idea that God doesn't do all of that kind of stuff, that he's loving and he's kind and wonderful and marvelous and magnificent and all of those good things. And so the question always arises, why would a good God allow bad things to happen to good people?
Yeah, I think so. Of course, that is a question I think people have. I think one, we know that because of sin, because of Satan, that a lot of wicked and evil in the world is behind, Satan's behind that. We think about the story of Job, and Satan wreaks havoc on Job's life. But here we see in Jonah, God sends the wind and he sends the wave. And so, what stood out to me is that with Job, Satan's goal is to destroy Job's faith and relationship with God. God sends a trial to build faith in him. And I think, there's sometimes, and we know we're stubborn, we're hard-headed, right? I'll speak for myself, right? There's some lessons that I'm able to learn unless I fail or I kick my, or I keep trying it another way. It's finally when I deal with the consequences of that behavior or whatever that may be, that I'm finally able to see how that path is not good for me, no matter, even if I think it brings freedom, And so I think there's a way in which trials are able to do something that in our lives that other things can't do. Even when you think about working out, if you want to build muscle, you have to go through some type of pain. You have to build up your wind. You teach cross country, I think about my kids and their first year in cross country, how traumatized they were. But but all of that, the ability to, that was a character building moment, but the ability to run that was something that you have to go through the discipline and come to a place where you have to go beyond what you think you're humanly capable in order to learn or come to a place where you can now travel and run with ease, right? So I think that God is doing something in these things that can only happen in those ways, right? I don't know if that makes sense, or Carlin or Robin wants to add anything or any thoughts to that. No? Okay.
No. I mean, we assign a level of difficulty. In gymnastics, call it a degree of difficulty. As Christians, we assign a level of the degree of difficulty to how God can reach us, right? How God can prepare us for our purpose. And a lot of times we believe that degree of difficulty comes with a certain, I guess you could say, sense of entitlement, right? Jonah was almost like, well, if I'm gonna go through all of this, right, I must have a choice in it. No, God is preparing you for something, right? God is utilizing these non-traditional ways, these non-traditional means, and we call them non-traditional. That's what I mean by assigning a level of difficulty. But everything is inside of God's toolbox. Right. He can literally use anything, in my case, he used cancer. In my case, he used amputation. In my case, he used financial ruin. In my case, that's not outside of what God can utilize in order to prepare us for our purpose. And so I think a lot of times there's a conflict that comes when we try to analyze too much. Like, what's happening to me right now? Why am I going through all this? I'm a good person. What, I mean, God, I don't deserve this. Well, listen here, the sugar pie. You don't deserve anything. Okay. And God is using everything in his toolbox to make your path walkable. If he didn't, you wouldn't be able to walk the path. And therefore we have to lean on the other promises. And what Jonah was struggling with was like, these people didn't deserve it. Well, he's struggling with his own attitude first. He was assigning a level of difficulty to the task that God had, when it's not difficult for God if you allow him to prepare you.
It makes me think of a couple of texts. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord, right? So God is able to use things in a way that we can't fathom. So I think you say sometimes we may be wasting energy trying to figure out how is this to my benefit, rather than just embracing it and know that he is going to do something deep in my life. Right. And of course, trials, we know that it's never easy. The Bible talks about it's during that time. No one enjoys it. It's not pleasurable, but it produces, the Hebrew writer says in Hebrews 12, righteousness, right? It produces something in our hearts and our lives that is meaningful and transformational. When I think about the culture, though, do you think that the culture makes embracing trials difficult, or even popular Christianity? Because you think about some, this notion of trial is like, should not be, what do you think? How do you think that influences our perception of trials? Any thoughts? Go ahead.
I believe that Christians in general, how can I put this? In fear of what other people think or believe, will not reveal their struggles in life. Because the ones who should encourage them is the ones who's talking about them. And so Jonah's story is no different than our story. As a Christian, we've been compelled to go and to do. There's some of us that still won't go. There's some people that we still don't want to talk to. They want to be around. And so God has a message in this story for us, that you're not all of that. And I'm still dealing with your knucklehead self. And how you not gonna go and see them when I come to see you? Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That sometimes we get the idea that we've arrived, that we don't have to do that. And and so I just believe that these stories give us an opportunity to see ourselves.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carla. Look like you want to say something. No?
Were you?
I don't think anyone likes trials. I don't think any of us want to know that we might have to experience something to get to the other side of something. And I think even with that, God still, in the Jonah story, he showed his love to Jonah, even though he sees the beginning. He knew all of this was going to take place. He knew that Jonah was going to be on the boat. He knew that Jonah was going to try to act like, I don't know what's going on. And then he knew that Jonah at some point was going to say, the storm coming is because of me. He knew all of those things. The whale was going to come and swallow him, and it's going to vomit him on to land. He knew all that. But Jonah had to get to the point of going through that to realize, with this trial, even though I did things to bring this trial upon myself because of the choices and the decisions that I made, but even with that, God is showing me every step of the way that he loves me and he cares for me and he protects me and he's going to see me through. So when we think of the Jonah story, we can liken that to the things in our lives that we consider this is a trial. I don't want to deal with this trial. This is not something that I had planned on going through. But with the Jonah story, we can go back to saying, even though this is something that is difficult and hard, and I don't know how I see my way through it, I have to know that through the steps and the process that I've been given this trial, that he's going to be there with me. And I'll be able to look back and see, thank you for it, because I'm stronger for it. I'm smarter for it. I realized that this was a step in my journey to help me with the next thing that is going to happen in my life. I mean, we know in this life that we live in, things are going to happen, things are going to come, that we are just going to have to lean on him 150%. And I feel that the trials increase our faith. And that's what it's going to take in this life. And even though we don't want it, we have to realize, you know what, you know best, and please help me hang on through it. But I know you got me.
Pastor, I want to say something here. First, I feel bad for even saying this after what my wife said so beautifully here. The disclaimer is that the views that I'm about to express are not those of the Hillcrest Seventh Baptist Church nor Pastor Marlon Reed. I have to put this wrinkle in here. What we saw last year in America reflect that Christianity in America is just a surface thing, because there's a large segment of the Christians in America last year in 2020 who, when the first trials came their way, they lost their minds. Your question was, how do we embrace trial? I'm gonna tell you something right now. If you are a Black Seventh-day Adventist Christian, you've embraced trial. There's a certain level of stuff that we have to deal with on a regular basis that last year we were like, that's just called being us in America. But some of our counterparts experienced it for the first time in their lives, and all of a sudden Christian principles go out the window. Christianity goes like, it saved me from these trials. And like, well, maybe God is trying to get your attention on something, our attention collectively. Maybe he's trying to cleanse us for a second. Maybe he's trying to slow us down and realize that we're not the center of the universe. We're not the center of the world. You know what I mean? And so when trials come our way, embracing that as part of our journey is something that a lot of Christians haven't experienced. A lot of so-called Christians have only experienced that prosperity gospel. If I do what he says, if I'm obedient, if I do this or do that, I'm going to be blessed. I'm not going to experience, hardship. I have to do if I'm just a good person, I won't experience that. Man, please. By all accounts, Jonah was a good person before all of this happened. We don't know much about other than that. We know he had a bad attitude during it. But that might be because he wasn't embracing the trial. He didn't believe he deserved that, because he didn't want to have to do the dirty work, right? And once he got called to do the dirty work, his attitude changed. And when his attitude changed, all of a sudden, these Christian principles that he had before, if I'm walking down somebody's street, so these Christian principles that we all espouse, or when you talked about all this time, went out the window last year. Because all of a sudden, the trials were greater than what we thought the blessing would be. I'm saying some.
No. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And that's definitely, we see that all the Christian principles went out the window. And God's act towards him was in response to his disobedience. He had to do that in order to bring him to that place, But you're touching on something, and I'm going to try to circle back with that a little bit here in our conversation. I think it'd be a little bit related to that question, to your comments rather. What hope then does this provide for believers in general when we have moments when we don't want to have nothing to do with God? When we think about what Jonah, he wanted nothing to do with God. I mean, he wanted to get as far away from him as possible, but we see God in pursuit of him. What hope does that provide for us as believers? As we relate to our own way of relating to God in disobedience, when we want nothing to do with him. Because the truth is, some days we wake up and we wish we could just do our own thing. You know what I mean? If we were to be honest and transparent, right? You know, we want his protection, his blessing, but we don't want him telling us specifically what we need to do. You know what I mean? And so, but we see that even when we have that attitude and we purposely go against him, we see God coming towards us. You know, what does that say to us today, or to you? You know?
I think for me, Pastor, I'm gonna be totally transparent. There have been times in my life that I didn't want to go to church. I did, you know, I'm just real.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have anything to do with anything that was wholesome and good, you know. And I just wanted to be free to do what I wanted to do. And so I know that when those moments come, and they will come, that God in his infinite wisdom always brings somebody across your path to do something or say something that cause you to rethink, you know, the thoughts that that you've made. Being, for me, always trying to be available to do something, to share something with somebody, you know, has been that crutch that I lean on, you know, because I try to most oftentimes not think about my life. I think about how can I be a benefit and a blessing to somebody else. Every time I pick up the word of God, I'm always studying, because I know that at some point I'm going to teach. At some point, you know, I'm in a pulpit. At some point, I'm going to be called upon to give a word. And so it's the draining of that that causes me sometimes to want to withdraw. And it's like I have no time for myself. And that, you know, and so, you know, I just believe that God has a way of bringing us back around to our senses, you know, because there's no other way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Pastor.
No, go ahead.
Okay. What I think about when you ask that question is I think about examples of parents and family members that have prayed and prayed and prayed for their children or for their grandchildren, sometimes for years and years and years. And for them not knowing what God was going to do or how he was going to do it, or just trusting and believing. But those stories of celebration that they have when they had prayed for so many years and their child leaves the life that they were praying that they would leave and comes back, or their child or grandchildren become baptized or become, you know, just a renewed faith that maybe they might have grown up in something and then their life went a different direction, but they came back. To me, that's hanging on to that faith and belief that he will do it. He will do it. There's not a timetable. And I think sometimes we are so used to in our culture as everything is instant. Everything that we do has to be quick, and we have to see it to believe it. And so when we have to take ourselves out of that and saying we have to believe, and we just have to just keep that faith, and we just have to keep doing that. I think of parents, and that is a testimony that many have. And sometimes in a situation like that, it could be 15, 20 years that they are just petitioning the throne and just saying, I don't know, but you know. But I just think that intercessory prayer and that just believing, that has been proof to so many that is real, and that can be, you know, that can be powerful, and it can be a testimony to so many others.
Yeah. You know, I'm here today because of my mother's intercessory prayer, because there is no way anybody could have told me this 20 years ago that I'd be sitting here having a panel, that I'd be preaching anywhere, right? Because I had my Jonah experience, and my mother interceded for me. She would tell me later, after I came back to the church, she'd say there were nights she would wake up and she would pray, and fall asleep and wake up praying. And I often wonder, like, I wonder where I was at that moment that she was praying. You know what I mean? You know, and what God was doing that I was totally unaware of, that was keeping me protected, and that was bringing me back to him, you know, which I think that stands out to me so much about this story, is that no matter how far we go, even willfully, if we make our bed in hell, David says, there, right? We go to the uttermost parts of the sea. He is, where can we go from his spirit? That's how committed God is to us. And we see that being revealed in Jonah's life. But, you know, as I kind of studied this sermon, we kind of get to this point here, as I thought about that, you know, Jonah's reluctance to go to Nineveh. You know, initially you think, you know, Nineveh, they were known, they skinned people alive. They would actually chop people's head off and build pyramids at the gates of their city. Outside after they captured their city, they were nicknamed Blood City. They were violent robbers. They were experts in cruelty, right? And so on one level, there's a sense in which Jonah is afraid of them, right? But what we discover is that it's not even so much that he's afraid of them, but that they're not of the same. They're not Israel. He didn't want God to extend grace to them because they were of another nationality, right? And so really we see kind of, I would say, maybe one of the first nationalists in the Bible. It's this man of God, right? That is only concerned about his people at the detriment of others, right? And so as I thought about that, right, you know, how do we, and so that influenced how he relates. He did not want them to be forgiven or to receive the grace of God, right? Because, hey, you know, that's only for us, you know, that shouldn't, and you deserve not to be forgiven, right? And so do we see this, you know, today in American culture today, right? Right? Kind of, is this anywhere to be seen? And is this happening even in the ranks of among Christians? You know what I mean? So, you know, you have the secular culture, but are we as Christians thinking like, you know what? I don't care. I don't want God to forgive them. I don't want them to be in the kingdom with me. You know what I mean? You know, so any thoughts on that?
Yeah, but not that we literally say it out of our mouths, but the way we go about our everyday lives as Adventists, we really, if you think about it, we really don't want to have anything to do with a whole lot of other people. We're not just readily acceptable to other people. As long as I've been an Adventist, I've never seen a Baptist preacher come in an Adventist church and preach. You understand? Yeah. Is that we live such an exclusive life, like this is an exclusive club, you know, that you have to be a Seventh-day Adventist to get in it. And that we don't want to move outside of that because you're not one of us. I remember a time that we had a visitor in the church and we cite the fourth commandment like it's a badge, like we hold that up in high esteem. And I was looking at the lady, she looking at everybody like this here. She don't know it, but she looking around like this here. Like, what the world have I got myself into? And so as Adventists, and I am a 7-day Adventist, but my roots didn't come in Adventism. So I was a heathen just like Saul, and so I had to embrace the truth, and by God's grace, I am what I am, but I can sit back and look at this thing from a different perspective and see how we live such exclusive lives and don't want to venture out too much. We'd rather give money, for the ministry than ourselves to go over in Cumberland View, which is called Dodge City. So it hadn't been so long ago. I don't remember us ever going over there in all the years I've been in Hillcrest, setting up tents and just hanging out. So we've come a long way, but we still have yet, a little further to go. Yeah,
I think that I think a lot of times at Adventists, we kind of get into what I call a holy huddle. And we're afraid to go out because we don't want to be contaminated. Or if we go out too long, you know what I mean? Then you might rub off on me rather than me rubbing off on you. And so I stay in this group and I go out in spurts to try to get you. And if you don't respond in the time frame that I've allotted for you to respond, then you see me the next time I open the door again to come out, which may be next year, 3 years from now, whenever we have an evangelist campaign. So I think there's a sense in which, as Adventists, part of that is fear, you know what I mean? Or a lack at the root, a lack of love, of really understanding that the compassion of God causes us to go and reach everyone, you know what I mean? But I think Jonah had another problem, is what I'm trying to get at here, is that he was racist.
Wow.
He's like, no, they're not Jews,
Mm-hmm.
and they should not receive mercy, right?
Yeah.
And are we seeing that today? That Carlin, go ahead.
I'm trying to stay on the rails. Yeah, Pastor. I mean, it is the court on which America has been convicted within the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the case has been building against America for 400 years. But I'm saying the America has been convicted. We have been stripped down to, is this person a human being or not? That's where we are. We're not even talking about civil rights at this point. We're talking about human rights.
Mm-hmm.
Is that person even considered to be a human being? The basics. Mm-hmm. And what we have seen is, as Americans, is the most powerful, most prosperous nation in the world per capita, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we put ourselves in a position of doling out grace. Like, you deserve grace because I say so. Because you've got to dress like me. You've got to speak my language. You've got to worship my God. You've got to do that. And that is not what grace is about. It's not something we dole out as humans. It is only what God gives us and allows us to be in that position. So what Jonah didn't want to do, Jonah didn't want to dole out grace. And he didn't want to do it because they were different than him. So we don't get the same consideration as you do. I don't get to be considered a taxpayer. I'm a potential threat. I am not somebody who is considered to be an upstanding citizen. I am considered to be, a potential situation. You know what I mean? Because I'm different than you. And this is the culture that we have. And it isn't even just about race. It's about political affiliation as well. I'm not even going to speak grace to you because we don't have the same platform. Right? Yeah. And so what Jonah ends up doing is he ends up revealing his own preferences, his own racism, his own ideologies unashamedly. Like, he's having this conversation with God. Like, you know what? I don't care. They don't deserve it. They're Ninevites. Have you seen them? They're gay. They believe in abortion. They're this, they're that. You know what I mean? They don't deserve you. I deserve you. And he puts himself in the position of doling out grace. And the culture today that we see in Christianity in America is that a certain type of Christianity has put themselves in the position of doling out grace. You only get to keep your life if you don't comply, or if you comply. What? Yeah. You know what I mean? It is. We have now been convicted. I'm saying America has now been convicted in public court, and they almost don't even care. And that's where Jonah was. Jonah was like, Jonah had to be kicked and pushed to Nineveh, be put in front of the very people he despised, in order for God to say, it wasn't just for Nineveh, it was just for Jonah as well. I haven't heard many preachers say that. It's like he may have used a whole country, a whole city to reach Jonah. Like, I'm gonna put you in front of all these people and tell them my grace is sufficient for them. All of these killers and robbers and muggers and whatever, and sodomites and this, that, and the third. And I'm going to show you how far my grace reaches, Jonah, so that I can save you, because their hearts weren't hardened when they heard the grace of God. His was.
Yeah.
And that's where we are in culture in America today. Those who call themselves Christians have the hardest hearts and can't even recognize somebody as human.
Yeah.
But I say with all of that, though, and all that we're talking about, is that there are times when there is a humbling experience that someone goes through that has that hardened heart or has that outlook or that view. And it is a transformation that happens when something is allowed in someone's life or experience to change their mindset and to change their outlook. And that is a beautiful thing when we see that played out and happening in our world, in the stories that we read in the Bible. But even that, I still think, is God's grace in allowing that to happen, because like you were saying, it wasn't, what you were saying too, Pastor, in your sermon, it wasn't just for the people, it was for him as well. So these things that happen to people that have that outlook and the separatism and the racism and things of that nature that people have instilled in them and can't see anything else, but that's just the way I was raised, or that's just the way I see things. When there is a humbling experience that happens in their life, that can all change. But sometimes we don't see that. We don't see that when it happens, but we don't know people's lives. We don't know what we see outside of the news that we watch and people that are, you know, having this platform or saying that. We don't know what happens outside of those times, that there's an experience that they have that they shift and change. But when that does happen, you can tell that something has happened and there is a change. And therefore, if there's a change, then that place where they were is different, and other people see that. So, you know, that's also a way of a change that happens, that you can align that with divine intervention for something happening. But
no, I agree. I think that God is able to use those situations. Like, you know, the story kind of ends with Jonah too. We don't know what ultimately his response was, because God confronts him and said, man, you care more about this plant, right? The death of your heart goes out. And it made me think about, you know, there'll be more outrage over the death of a dog, right? And the death of George Floyd. There was more indignation, you know. People were more indignant related to that. We see that in America than over a human being, right? And so we see that even with that God is trying to, root out this sinful perspective, this racist perspective that Jonah had in his heart. And we don't know ultimately how God dealt with that we may not see that, but God is using that. You know, I also think about that. What I think God was even trying to do with Jonah was help him to see that you're no better than the Ninevites. You go the other direction, buddy. You try to kill yourself. You know what I'm saying? You're no better than them. You are just in need of my grace as they are. You know, their sin, one sin is not better than the other sin. And it's like, as much as God was trying to drive that point home to him, he just could not hold on to that. And it seems like maybe at the end, when he thinks about this plant that he's lamenting, that he's able to see, like, wait a minute, you know, that's a plant. These are human beings that God created. His breath is in their nostril and he cares about them, you know. I also wondered, though, conversely, if in response to what we see, like towards Black and brown people in America, do we also feel, hey, we don't want them. We don't want salvation for them. We don't want salvation for Derek Chauvin, right? Or any of those other people, right? Are we in that place in response to that narrative, now becoming less concerned about the salvations of others because we no longer see them as a part of us? Do you think that that's possible?
I'm going to say something here, Pastor. I can't speak for anybody else. I don't have that narrative. While those people disgust me and they make me angry, I view it as the only way that those people can be saved. The only way they can have any redeeming qualities is if they go through the salvation process. Like, we were never together.
Hmm.
We were never on the same side.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? As a black person, I see a Derek Chauvin and go, but I always knew that.
Hmm.
I always knew who he was.
Hmm.
I've seen you 1,000 times. I've interacted with you. You know, you've had your foot on my back. You know, and so it's not that I don't want them to have the same salvation that I have or the same grace that I have. I look at it as they need that. Not that I don't, but I'm in the midst of it. I'm in the midst of working on my salvation. I'm in the midst of receiving grace. Clearly, there is in America a group of people that is going to have to come to a reckoning that they need Jesus, right? I don't know of a black person that I have ever met that said, I don't need Jesus. If you're doing that well, you're probably not black. I mean, even I'm saying, even those who are well to do. You know what I'm saying? I had a discussion, almost an argument, with a very good friend of mine. He's an attorney. He's Caucasian, and he was talking about how, well, like in America now, people like LeBron James don't even have to worry about what is he complaining about. I said, did you forget that when he moved to Los Angeles, he moved into a house that had the word NIGGR painted on it? Not all of his millions, not all of his fame, none of that could protect him from what the other side believes that he is and want to remind him of what they think he is. They need Jesus. And I'm not saying we all need Jesus, but what I'm saying is I don't have aught in my heart towards my brother for what they've done to me. I have what I have said is, you know what? The only way you're going to make it to the kingdom. Because see, I'm on my way. Now, whether I get there or not, that's my personal business between me and Jesus. But I'm definitely trying to get there. You're not even trying to get there with the way that you're treating me. There is no love of God in you when you can't view me as a human being. So that's where I start. I don't have that perspective of I don't want you in the kingdom. I just look at it as you're not going to be in the kingdom with that. And then there is a great washing that is happening right now. The people that have to look themselves in the mirror and say, either this person is created in the image of God, and I need to come to God so that I can live in that way, or they believe that the heaven is going to be for them, and one of us is wrong.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that the onus is ultimately on individuals who are unaware of their need, right? I guess my question, and I think generally, if we're not careful, becoming hard-hearted ourselves and thinking we're justified because we're on the receiving end. We have experienced this for 400 years. You know what I'm saying? We've dealt with it. So therefore, I no longer care about you. That you work that out. I'm just going to take care of me and myself and I, right? And I don't see that in the Jonah story. I see God calling believers to care for the souls of everybody, regardless of what they have done. You know, so I think that if we're not careful, we may retreat into our own world that is uncaring, justifiably so, because we've been traumatized. You know, I'm not ignoring that trauma, but if we're not careful, we could lose our souls because we harden our hearts and become just like Jonah. It's like, oh well, that's just how that people group is, and therefore let God deal with them. You know, I don't want to see that. So I think that's a tension that's out there. I'll let someone weigh in or comment. Then I want to ask one final question, and then we'll wrap up. Or if you want to add anything else, you know, of course.
I believe that if the truth be told, if we be honest with ourselves, I'm still mad. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also.
Well,
come on, preacher.
Real by Edwin.
Yeah.
I believe that in the process of things, in the process of time, that when a man is able to sit still, and God will be able to reach him, you know, and so the grace that has been available to me is available to everybody. But I think it has to come to a point in time when that person reaches the end of their rope and reach out to their only help. But I'm still angry. I'm still mad, you know. I mean, because because of my past, every day I get in my car, I make sure my tires does not roll up through a stop sign. I make sure that my brake lights are working. I make sure, that my seatbelt is on, because I know that the moment they pull me over, the moment they read my record, the moment they get out their car, they coming with their guns drawn, because they're going to be afraid, because I'm a black man. And let me be perfectly honest, that I was not only a danger to myself, but I was a danger to everybody around me. And so when they approach me, they're going to approach me like I'm a threat.
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, I walk through my neighborhood, and I go through scenarios in my mind of what I would do if this happened, because I know, you know what I mean? So I think that the goal, I think we have to not allow ourselves to be controlled by that narrative, though. You know what I mean?
That's
inwardly. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because other people are living their lives. They're not, while we're stewing, they're not, you know what I mean? We don't want to lose. We're over here brooding over this and being controlled. We may think we're exercising our freedom, but we're actually living according to the narrative that they want us to live according. They want us to be afraid, etc. You know what I mean? So I think we don't want to be controlled. Yeah, we're angry. What's wrong is unjust. And God is going to deal with them. And I think we see that judgment happening. You see what I'm saying? I think we see God, because I think this issue in America is not, like you said, it's a human, it's a moral, it's a spiritual issue. It's like, people's souls are hanging in the balance over this in their view of God and his interaction or lack of intervention. You know what I mean? So I think that how we deal with this issue is very, very, very critical and important. I want to read just a couple comments, and I want to ask this one final question. This is from Anonymous. It says, this sermon has caused me to see and admit that I am just like Jonah. I have claimed God as exclusively my own, and I realize this because there has been times when I'm angry at God for showing favor to other people and not just to me. I have been jealous of his attention to people that I think don't deserve his grace, right? Then we have another comment here. Says part of the reason that God calls us his children may be that just as a child, we want and expect what our parents can give us without living as they require, simply because we're their child, right? So we see God is calling us to live a certain way, but we think we're exempt, and we see in a previous comment, there's a little bit of Jonah in all of us, right?
Yes.
It's there, right? One final question, then I'm going to get ready to close. How can we apply the lessons revealed about the compassion of God's love for sinners to our communities, and especially the people of other people groups? How do we think what we see in the story of Jonah? What's the takeaway? How do we live this out, right? What are some things what lessons do we learn that we can apply and teach to other people, that we know, even if they're of other ethnic groups?
I think one thing for me that I think of when you just said about Jonah and how it was very clear, and he made it very, there was no bones about it, how he felt. And I think it's very important for people to be honest about how they feel. If you're not being honest and saying, I feel this way about you, I look at this group like this, you all are this, then you're going to not ever get to the point of saying, what do I do with this? And how can I be in a different place or a different perspective or see things differently? So you have to be honest with how you really feel. And sometimes being honest, nobody wants to feel that way. Nobody wants to have people look at them like, you think that? You go to church, you do this, and you really inside your heart look at the homeless person on the street that way, or think about that person that way. So if you are not willing to say, you know what, Lord, I know this is ugly, but in order for me to be in a different place, I got to put it out there for you to change me and help me to see, just like Jonah, the Ninevites, these are people that you gave breath to. They bleed red blood just like I do. Help me to see and change my outlook, change my perspective, so that I can be used in a positive way and not be used in a in a way that is not showing your love that I profess to be. And I think that is key, number one. And so I think we can learn from the Jonah story because he put it out there. He was honest about it. But so many of us are down low, thinking different ways, and don't want anybody to know. But it's in us. So you know, we have to be real, and if we want to be taken to the next level of what he has for us to do while we are here among all, then we have to be ready to do that. But if you're not ready to look at it, if you're not ready to say what it is, then it's gonna be repeating itself, and not just you, but the children that you raise or the people in your life. It's gonna be repeated generation after generation.
Yeah. Wow.
Pastor.
That's powerful, and I think that's true. Go ahead.
Yeah. Because I'm still struggling with the people on the street corners. You know, I mean, I wrestle with that. I mean, because I want to do good. I want to do random acts of kindness. But in my mind, in my heart, I can't give everybody that's standing on the corner waving at me money. You know, and so a part of me wants to, the bigger part of me don't. You know, so I'm caught between, you know, do I or do I not? You know, or can they get a job like me? Or I mean, not the job that I have, but get a job. And if you can stand on concrete for 10, 12 hours, then you ought to be able to, you know, to do something, hold a sign on the street corner. And, you know, and so I struggle with it because I know that there's some fraud behind it. Because I've seen guys get out of cars on the interstate below and run up the ramp and hold a sign up on the top of the street that's on, you know, up above the overpass. So I've seen a lot of stuff like that because I'm all over the city, you know, when I'm riding around. And so it just caused my heart to be hardened towards them.
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick? This is one thing that I don't know if I heard about this or I thought about this, and I have not had the chance to implement it, but I want to. When people have the homeless, Edwin, to what you're saying, because we see it all the time. We see it driving around Nashville, especially with so many people coming here and so many things that maybe didn't work out for people or whatever, that we see them at the stop signs and at the stoplights and certain intersections. But one thing could be, and Pastor, this might be another ministry that we do or have something, but actually when they have the signs that say hungry, or, you know, when people think that they see, will think, well, what do I have in my car to give? And some people aren't comfortable rolling their window down and giving, but, you know, having some fruit in the car or having something that, you know, tangibly, I can't give you money because of wherever we might be thinking with that, but here's some apples, here's some oranges, here's something to give you some nourish something, or cereal bars or granola bars or things like that. So that might just be something that we might just be able to have, you know, just things in our car, you know, if it's just us in our seat, behind our car seat, that we can actually give. That might be something too, when there's a struggle with money, because some people, I mean, it is true. And Edwin, to what you're saying, that is true, that when people have those signs, you're giving money, but you're wondering, are they using it for what the sign says that they have, or, you know, just what the question is? So that just might be something too. Or when it's cold, a blanket or some gloves in your car that you could just, you know, give.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The biggest takeaway that I have from this sermon, this series, is that, well, before I say this, I have a business mentor, and he said how he grew his one-man business into now 9 people and a $2.5 million company in 5 years, was that he was obsessed with customer service. He is obsessed with making sure that his customers had the best experience possible, no matter what the profit margin was, because eventually it would pay off, because happy customers are good customers, and good customers are paying customers, right? God is obsessed with reaching the lost.
Mm.
He is obsessed with reaching us.
Mm.
If he wasn't, he would not have put down divinity and come down to this trash bag called earth to live for 33 years. It took him to get to the point of the cross. I promise I'm not preaching. I'm just saying that he is obsessed with reaching us. And all of this time where we see the world doing what it's doing to itself, the fact that he hasn't struck us dead yet means he's obsessed with reaching us. He was obsessed with reaching the people of Nineveh. He was obsessed with reaching Jonah. To take somebody he loves. He loved Jonah dearly. He was like, I'm gonna send you here smelling like fish vomit. You know what I'm saying? To deliver my word. God is absolutely obsessed with reaching the lost. And that alone should be encouragement that no matter how far I've gone, no matter what I've done, also too, no matter what anybody else has done to me, or what other group of people look about how they've treated me, or even oppressed me, or whatever, God is obsessed with reaching them. And that puts into context everything that is happening currently around us. Everything that is happening to us, around us, with us, is part of God's plan to reach us. And I'm talking about us, I'm talking about the human condition. God is obsessed with reaching us. And time again, he gives us stories like the one of Jonah, where he has said, I will go to great lengths to reach you and them and her and him. And I'm going to do that until time is up. But until then, I will do whatever I have to do to save you.
Yeah. Pastor, I know we got to go, but that my last word is that I pray and hope that our condition, whatever we are dealing with, we do not use it as a crutch or a hindrance to be a blessing to somebody else.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the only way that we can do that is like what we see in Jonah, God having that ongoing encounter with God. Mm-hmm. So being in the belly of the fish had an effect, but he still needed that conversation at the plant. And so it is with us. God is every scenario that we encounter him, he's doing more in us. And it's that ongoing interaction with him that really causes us to have his heart, to see life in others through that. So yeah, and I appreciate what you guys have shared, man. Powerful stuff. My heart is blessed. Again, you're going to hear a trash bag called Earth. That's coming to a sermon.
And let's also still be clear. The fish that Edwin was talking about at the beginning of this whole thing is a 2-piece with some white bread and some fries. We ain't talking about a whale.
I wish I could share my screen because I caught a 40-pounder 2 weeks ago.
Wow, man, you serious, man? Good stuff, man.
That was just for Carlin.
Okay.
And you bring me my French fries when I
got the fries, brother. I'll bring the fries.
That's all right. I want to thank you guys again. I'm always blessed by you guys coming on and sharing, and I'm sure that those who are watching have been blessed as well. And so until next time, we plan to be again with you next week, God willing. Different group of panelists, but we'll be back again next week, and pray that God blesses you the rest of your day and your week, that you would encounter him and that you be reminded of just how obsessed and committed he is to loving us. God bless you. Until next time.
Thank you for staying by for Afternoon Intersections. Until next time, may you continue to reflect, apply, and live Christ's words.